So now you have sketched your artwork. What's next? I mean, obviously coloring it, right? So you do that and somehow the artwork ended up looking worse. For some reason, it looks like rainbow vomit. How the heck did that happen? Well, in the second part of creating an epic illustration series, I'm gonna walk you through my thoughts and processes in coloring an artwork, plus some tips and tricks, so get your notes ready. In case you missed the previous video, we divided the creation process into 3 phases. The first one is pre-production, which was discussed previously. The phase 2, which we are now in, is called production. It's finally time for us to actually produce the art. In this phase, we're gonna follow 3 steps. Since we have the sketch already, it's time for my favorite part, clean up, or inking, or line art, whatever you wanna call it. Even if you're planning to go for a lineless style, I still suggest that you clean up your sketch as it helps you develop a solid form. Now, obviously, there are artists who don't do line art anymore, but that is because they already know what they're doing and they have tons of experience. If you're new or still figuring this out, it's good to have a guide on where you have to put the colors in through line art. This is the step where we have to correct our sketch and flesh out the details we missed in the previous phase. I actually have a video discussing clean up in depth, so go check that out if you like more info. For this artwork, I'm going to use a thin line without any line weight, around 5 to 10 pixels depending on the resolution. That is because I want to emphasize the colors more rather than the lines. It is also essential for me to use thin lines for the next step. Whether or not you like to use thick and weighted lines on your own art, it's up to you and your style preferences. You can even add some black shading in this step if you prefer a superhero comic style. Inking is my favorite part of the process because it has a meditative effect on me. I can pretty much zone out, while the other steps require me to use some brain power and it can be quite draining. Anyway, once we finish the line work, the next step would be adding some flat colors. In this step, you can pretty much just use the paint bucket or magic wand. I personally don't like using them because it leaves gaps in between the lines like this. What I usually do is manually select the areas using the lasso or pen tool and just fill the selection by pressing Alt-Delete. It does sound super tedious, but it actually doesn't. Don't worry, I will discuss this further in another video, so be sure to smack the subscribe button to receive updates. I do the flats this way because I lower the opacity of my line art. I call it the semi-lineless style. In a way, it makes my artworks look a bit lineless. Now, you might be wondering why I'm using dark colors, and you might be weirded out that this doesn't look like skin tone colors. Let me explain. Commonly, when doing flats, a lot prefer to use light colors and then adding the shading afterwards. However, I do the opposite. I use dark colors for flats and then add the lighting. For some reason, when I do light flats and dark shading, my drawings end up flat looking, so I experimented and did the reverse, and I'm more satisfied with the results. For the background, since it's nature, I'm just gonna do some rough painting. If the background has buildings and solid stuff, I would be more precise, but for nature stuff like forest, I prefer freestyling it. Don't worry, we'll deal with this later. The important thing for me is establishing where the campfire is because I need it for the next step, which is lighting or shading. Before we paint some lights to our subjects, we have to establish where the light is coming from. Since it's nighttime, the main light source would be the campfire. In addition to that, I would like to add some blue lighting in the far back on the right side. This is something I've observed in live action films. They would usually add some light in the background so the subjects would pop out better and it looks more dramatic. Otherwise, it will just be pitch black and we don't want that. So we'll be painting yellow-orange around the campfire and some bluish bits on the background. I usually render everything in one area at a time, and I will usually start with the character's face mainly because I love drawing faces. I would start by painting huge blocks of color on where I think the light would fall upon the face, and when there's light, there will be shadow. So I would add a color darker than the flat colors to establish where those shadows will cast. After that, I would go deep into rendering the details. I really just take my time on this and I don't move on to the other areas until it looks right on my eyes. I'm kind of perfectionist that way. We'll just fast forward this because it took me an hour just to do the face alone. If you have any questions, feel free to leave a comment below. After I'm done with the face, I'll move on to the hair. Same procedure, add some blocks of color for lighting and shadows, and then go nuts with the details. I don't really paint individual strands of hair, but to give an illusion of hair strands, I would paint pointy bits on the transition of colors like this. Then I would just pick the next part I'm in the mood to color at the moment. I went with the guy's armor first. Based on the reference, his armor doesn't really look shiny and it has some speckle on it, so I try to emulate that in my rendering. I'm also paying attention to the armor's volume to make sure the shading doesn't look flat. It's a bit complicated to explain how to lay it out, especially on detailed objects like this. I would just get into flow state and see where to put the colors on the spot. If you want a tutorial video about shading, let me know. In case you're curious, I just use this simple round watercolor brush for adding colors. I would use different brushes based on what texture I'm after. For example, to add speckles in the armor, I use this dust brush that I downloaded somewhere. If I can find it, I will post the link in the description because I'm pretty sure I didn't get this in the asset store. In every part, I'll pretty much do the same procedure. Add the lighting, add the shadows, add the details, and then add the textures. It takes a lot of time and patience, but it's very rewarding once we get to the end result. By the way, Clip Studio's asset store is an absolute goldmine for brushes. You don't really need to pay anything because a lot of the free assets here are really good. Like for this scaly texture on her armor, I just downloaded this scale brush, and you can see here when I paint this brush, the patterns just repeat. It really speeds up the process. There are a lot of patterns here like chains, grass, flowers, so on and so forth. You just need to search for it. Here's what we have so far. I think it's coming up real great. Now we have to deal with the background, but I'll save that for the next video because I'll be sharing with you a neat little technique I learned recently to speed up painting backgrounds. In the meantime, why don't you check out this video about how to draw literally any poses you like using a child's drawing.